My channel has been dedicated to reviewing the mainline series of the Resident Evil games, and has finally come to a close with the release of Resident Evil Village. But the question I get asked all the time is which one is my favourite and where they kind of sit amongst themselves. So I'm here to answer that. Of course, I'm not going to be covering off any of the spin-offs or any of those games because I haven't reviewed them yet. You'll also see on this that I'm not including Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2 originals because I haven't given them their own dedicated video yet. What follows is my personal opinion. It's not necessarily going to mash up with yours, and that's what makes it interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys think though, so make sure to put a comment down below and put your ranking in there. It's always interesting to hear, especially with how diverse the opinions are on all the videos I put out so far. If you've been enjoying my content, put a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. It all helps me grow my channel and find a larger audience. But that's enough of that. Let's get into this. So, it will come as no surprise to anybody if you've watched any of my previous reviews that my favourite is Resident Evil Remake for the GameCube. I adore this game. To me, it's the blueprint of everything that Resident Evil is, and it just distills everything to its base elements, so you can focus on planning, your preparation, your enemies, and which ones you dispatch and which ones you leave alive, combined with your ammo and resource management, just all comes alive together in such a cohesive package that I think is just superb. Especially when they added in, for the remake, the addition to burn bodies, as opposed to the original where they just, just die. It's just brilliant, because it means that you've got an extra layer of tactical choice on top of what you've already got. Superb. Superb game. Nothing will ever beat it. So, let's get off with another easy one. Yeah, come on. Now, I'm really shocked to see in the comments on this review for Resident Evil 6 that so many people love this game, because for me, it's easily the worst entry. Easily. It does so much right in terms of its core kind of gameplay, in terms of the shooting, the movement, which is so clean, so nice. But it hangs around way too long. Like I said in my review, you've seen everything by the time you've done about 5 hours in, and then you've got another 15 odd hours in front of you. It's overkill. And really, it's just not fun. To me, I just couldn't wait for it to be finished, and that's something that I can't say for any of the other games that we're going to go through. So, now that those two easy ones are out of the way, where do we go for? So I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to work it through just in chronological order. Not in terms of release, but in terms of where the games are kind of set. So it means we're going to start off with Resident Evil 0. Now Resident Evil 0 is quite a tough one because it's got everything I should love about Resident Evil. It's got the fixed camera angles, it's got all the same kind of item management on the base part. The only difference is there's no item box. And because of that, it means that it just becomes more annoying than anything else. Now, well, that's my opinion on it anyway. Now, I do like the enemy design for the enemies that are in there, and I really do like Billy, and I'm really surprised that Billy hasn't shown up since. But I think for the moment, and this is probably going to change, for the moment I'm going to bang it in C. The lack of the item box just kills it for me, because it just adds so many backtracks, and it's the only Resident Evil out of all of them so far that I've found that enemies respawn. You're watching your ammo count. Last thing you want to do is go through an area and find enemies have respawned there. What's the point in clearing out entire sections of the game to make backtracking easier, to then find that you might as well just left them alive and avoided them all anyway? Something about it just doesn't sit right with me. But that's where it's going to live for now. So, next, Resident Evil 2. Now, I know a lot of you are of the mind that Resident Evil 2 Remake isn't as good as the original. Now, I don't have the same soft spot for the original like you guys do, or a lot of you do. My game that I had the soft spot for was Resident Evil 3. Nemesis. That's the one that I fell in love with. Now, Remake, I adored. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I think the characters are amazing. The graphical presentation is superb. The enemy mix, like I said in my review, with Mr. X, the Lickers, and the zombies, is just so deep and just perfect. It's just like a cocktail where they all combine into each other to just heighten the overall experience. I don't really have an awful lot to say about it that's negative, actually, to be honest. It's definitely in there, number 2 for me, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, the original, if I was going to rank that at the moment, would probably be an A, but I do want to replay it. It's been a long time since I've played it, so I don't take that opinion for granted, that's for sure. But that's where it's living for the moment, Resident Evil 2. And this is all probably going to be changed by the end. Okay, Resident Evil 3. So I got both Nemesis, which I covered for the channel, and Remake, which I did before I even kind of knew what my content was. But I'm including it anyway, because, you know, why not? Why not? Give me something to talk about. So Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Right, now this is the game. This is the game that turned me from being a Resident Evil fan into being a fanboy. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the game that I sweated. A lot of people had that same kind of relationship to the series from 2, but that wasn't my path. I played a bit of 2. I had it on a demo at the time, if I remember right, and my uncle gave me a like a chipped version of a PS1 game, but it was like really weird because it had like Leon's first half of the campaign and then Claire's second on one disc. Really, really weird. So I never really got the full kind of Resident Evil 2 experience kind of at the time. I just thought it was a really strange game. I didn't really clock up to the fact that it was obviously just a messed up copy. I don't even know how that even happened. But regardless, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the one I bought day one, and just played it over and over and over and over and over again. Now, you guys know I'm not a massive fan of Mercenaries. I don't really care about any of those extra modes. I don't think they add anything to the game. And most of the time I just find it's kind of like filler. I don't really care for it. I like the kind of mainline series, play that, just try and get better speeds, try and get better ranks, things like that, rather than have these extra things to do. I don't really care. I got enough to play. But Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is the exception to that rule, because that's the one that I sweated Mercenaries on. Now, it could have been my age. I mean, when I played that, I was what? It came out in 1999, I think, so I was 10. Give my age away here now. But, yeah, it could have been that I just had nothing else to play, and so that's why I played it so much, but I loved it. And replaying it for a couple of months back when I did the channel, I was really surprised at how well it stands up. Of course there's errors with it, there's issues with it, the dodge mechanic is fucking awful, but as an actual game, as a gameplay experience, it's just really fun, start to finish. It's just a shame that Nemesis doesn't really stand up himself, but it's what it is. Okay. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Okay. Now, if you looked online, the vast majority of the people who love Resident Evil 3 hate Nemesis. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. They do hate Nemesis, but they hate kind of the entire game. They hate how it's all changed. They hate how the clock tower isn't there, how there's so much cut content, everything like that. And I can see that criticism, I really can. But for me, what they did was they kind of just streamlined the entire process. So what they did was, for Resident Evil 3, for the remake, they said, what is the core premise of the game? And it's an escape from Nemesis. So, let's just make it all about that. Let's cut out any of the puzzles, really. Let's cut out kind of everything that can kind of slow progress down, slow momentum down, and streamline it towards this just shared goal for Jill to get out. And it's different. It's very different from the original in pretty much every single way. There's some key kind of plot points that kind of hang around for both, you know, Jill getting infected, stuff like that, but Some major differences. Obviously, Jill doesn't even go to the RPD, it's Carlos that goes there. But with all of these games, every single game that I play, I go in with a totally blank mind, kind of try and keep my expectations to as open as they can be. I mean, for Resident Evil, I've always got a promise, really, that I think I'm going to get a great experience, and that's not always the case. But for Resident Evil 3, I loved it. I thought it was great. It's one of the only Resident Evil games that I've gone through and got the Platinum for, just replayed it over and over and over again, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I didn't really see why everyone hated it to the extent that they did, and I'm quite happy going forward when we get like Resident Evil 4 Remake if they took a similar approach where they said, you know what, let's just redo it completely. You've still got the original there to play if you want to, and I suppose it all just depends on what vision they have. And for me, the vision of we're just going to completely streamline it around one premise really worked for me. Okay, Code Veronica. Now we're getting into the games now where I was playing them for the first time. So Code Veronica is the one that kind of started this YouTube channel off on its path that it's been on for the last while. I had a lot of success with this video when it went up, and not originally, not to start with, like months later, the algorithm just did me a solid, and it started getting looked at by people, and then that kind of trickled then into doing Resident Evil 0, and then playing kind of all of the games I hadn't come round to before then taking on the Mainline series, where we just ended now. And Code Veronica is one that had been on my hit list for a long time, and for some reason just never took the time to play it. And I'm so glad I did. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. Now, granted, there's some glaring issues with there that I think could really be uplifted with a remaster or remake. And that would be things like the voice acting's horrendous, the performances are really bad across the board. Steve Burnside, Jesus Christ, just stabbed my eyes out and just deafened me. He's just horrendous throughout. And when he gets turned into a monster at the end, I didn't care. I was actually quite glad that he was gone. And the only other issue I got with it really is that the splits between Chris and Claire, when those happen, they're not made clear. And so that could have been a potential run ender for me. It wasn't, fortunately, because I play so careful on Resident Evil games. But those are really my only critiques with the game. I think the actual game overall is superbly balanced. I think it's incredible. Now, I do see, and this has been quite surprising for me actually, is I've seen a lot of people say about Code Veronica being incredibly hard and being the most difficult Resident Evil. I honestly don't see that at all. I really don't. I think Resident Evil 2 is way harder, especially if you're playing it on hardcore. I think that's a much harder experience than Code Veronica X was. I honestly didn't think it was that bad. People say, like, when you go in to fight Tyrant on the plane, that's kind of a run ender. I mean, I didn't know what was coming, and I went in there with loads of stuff. My BOW weapons and things like that, my BOW gas grenades. But, you know, if you're new to the series, it's probably not the best place to start, because it is so long. It's one of the longest, if not the longest game on here, on this list, and other than Resident Evil 4 maybe. And it's just a true Resident Evil game. And if you like the classic tank controls, which have been updated actually with a more dynamic camera, it's brilliant. And it stands the test of time today. It is absolutely sensational. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, Resident Evil 4. Now this is where I know I'm going to get some shit for this. It's a great game. It's not a Resident Evil game. There's literally nothing about it that's Resident Evil at all. It's got Leon in it and Ada. That's it. There's no tension in the game. There's no atmosphere. Even the most formidable enemies in, like, the regenerators, I mean, you just tap them in the leg and run past. There's nothing there. it's a really, really fun experience. And when I played it, the inventory management, the enemy kind of varieties, all excellent. The shooting and the kind of tank controls works well for the game, for what I feel. But I just don't think it's a Resident Evil game. I just don't think it's got any atmosphere. It's got no ties to the lore. Nah. So I'm going to put it in B for now. It might move, but that's where it's living for now. Alright, Resident Evil Revelations. So Resident Evil Revelations was a real surprise when I played it, because I hadn't played this game before. I had a 3DS, but I had it later. I had it for Smash on the 3DS. That was all I really had on it. I had that and a couple of Zeldas and a Pokemon, I think. And so I knew it was on there, and I heard that it was decent, but just never really felt the need to play it, to be honest. And I can't believe what I was doing with my life, because it's actually amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. The bosses are sensational. I think about them still to this day, like the comms officer and Rachel with her boobs out chasing you around. I think it's awesome. I think they just did a really, really good job. The only problem I have with it, but it's quite a major problem, is what, like I said in my review, is the weapons scaling. I think the upgrade system was just too powerful. It made it so that you could just walk your way through the entire game. After probably the midway point, you just became so obscenely powerful. My rifle, I had like 60 odd rounds with it, and it would one-shot everything. It doesn't matter how many hunters you throw at someone then, what's the danger, you know? And that's my only issue with it. I think the dodging in it was absolutely fantastic. I think the way it moves and the way you shoot and everything is all sensational. I think it lives there for now. I think it lives there. I think I might need to move all this around. Actually, the more I'm looking at it, the more I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to have to move all this around. Oh, we'll keep going for now. Alright, Resident Evil 5. Oh boy, I've been on a journey with Resident Evil 5. So, Resident Evil 5 was the first Resident Evil Platinum I got. Me and my friend Phil, a fellow podcast host, we put so many hours into this back on PS3. Loved it. I mean, I love Wesker, massive fan of Wesker. Seeing Jill and Chris in there as well is just sensational. And the ties back to the wider lore with finding the flower and kind of everything with Spencer is awesome. It's just not really that fun to play. It's just really not. At the time I remember loving it, and it could have been that just with having the co-op be so novel, and at the time on its release there wasn't that many co-op experiences, but it was kind of becoming all the rage then at that point, and it felt really novel to play with somebody else online. Now I've never played with Shiva as an AI, not for any extended time anyway. Just I've always played it with friends. And Resident Evil 5 is probably the second most played Resident Evil out of all the Resident Evils that are on this list. With Resident Evil 3 probably being number 1. Let's go in there. Let's go in there. I just didn't find it that fun. And I think the kind of tank controls were at that point, with the amount of enemies that you've got and how kind of aggressive they are, just pushed their limit. Yeah, that's it for that one. Resident Evil Revelations 2. Now, this is the biggest surprise out of all of them for me. The biggest surprise. I went into this game with middling expectation, because I enjoyed Revelations. I didn't think it was anything revolutionary or anything, but I enjoyed it. And Revelations 2 just literally took everything that I had a problem with the original Revelations, with like the scanning, the upgrade system being just too OP, and just worked all of that into it, while also just adding a really, really nice story. I really, really loved the plot that was unfolding with Wesker's sister. And you know, seeing kind of the 6-month difference between Barry and Claire, I loved it. And I mean, Christ, it's got Barry Burton in it. I mean, what more do you want, you know? Playing as Barry Burton? Jesus Christ, that should be an A ranking in itself. For now, it's going there. For now, it's going there. For now. Alright. Here we go. This is where it gets hard. Resident Evil 7. So Resident Evil 7 was the kind of Hail Mary the series needed. It needed to have someone step in and put it back on track, and 7 was definitely that. I mean, after 4 kind of took the series off track, and then 5 and 6 obviously carried on in that formula, kind of iterating on it, taking more down this action route, it was losing me. And 6 at the time I loved, and I soured on it so much that when 7 was first kind of, not when it was announced, but when it was first kind of talked about, I wasn't over the moon about it by any stretch. And then we start seeing gameplay, and we start seeing demos, and get to play the demo and everything like that. And I was so blown away by it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. As you know from my review, if you watched that, I was smitten by it. It's just a perfect kind of realization of taking the series back to its most base elements in terms of, you know, managing your resources, managing your item space and what you take out with you, and using the item box, and kind of self-doubting yourself on if you're taking the right things out to get the job done. Now, the puzzles in it I think are a little bit weak. There's some amazing ones, like with the Happy Birthday puzzle, which is probably the best puzzle in the entire series, or one of. The only issue with that game really is half the bosses are shite, really bad, and you've got like this big difference, right? I don't mean to stay on this point for too long, but you've got the best boss fight in the entire series, in my opinion, with Marguerite. Sensational boss. Everything about it is just brilliant, from the setting in like her creepy like outhouse, or greenhouse, whatever it is. All of that combined with the fact she's kind of stalking you, so you just feel constantly uneasy throughout the entire thing. And the fact I hate bugs. It just combines into just such an amazing boss fight. But then you combine that with like the Jack Baker fight at the end of the game. Oh, and the Evelyn fight. Christ. And they're just so bad. They're just so bad that you just think, oh, that wasn't even spectacle. It was just horrible. Now Resident Evil 7 also, it's not quite even. The salt mine bit at the end where it goes all action doesn't really work too well for the game. I just kind of speedrun that entire thing now when I play it. But it's the game that I've replayed that a shed load of times. I got the platinum on it, loved it. Even on Madhouse, I thought it was absolutely sensational. And the story's great. It feels kind of self-contained, and it kind of does have some kind of ties to the wider lore, but they're not massive. But it posed a lot of questions, and I liked that. I did really like that. So where's he going to live? At the moment, I think I'm going to put it there. And here we go. Village. Village is kind of everything I really like from 4, fused with classic Resident Evil. It's kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. What it does in terms of wrapping up Ethan's story and then linking that all back into wider Resident Evil lore is sensational. I love it. It worked for me all throughout. The Chris section was absolutely brilliant. some of the boss fights, like the entire area for in House Beneviento, is just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And that entire section is one of, if not the best parts of Resident Evil. I love it. I love it. But where does it sit? I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I think Resident Evil 7's issue is the exploration's good, but it's not amazing. Resident Evil Village's exploration is great. Now you combine that in with the kind of upgrade loop that Resident Evil 4 has, and a brilliant item management system, and you got a really good formula. Now the reason why I'm putting it higher than Resident Evil 7 is strictly down to the I don't know. Oh, this is hard. Yeah, I'm sticking with it. And the reason why I'm putting it higher than that is because I think the plot's better, and I think it's got more set pieces, which don't take away from the overall atmosphere that the game has. Now, I don't think the game's tense. I don't think there's any tension in the game. There's no kind of real overt horror, other than one section, which is House Beneviento, obviously. But what it does in terms of setting you on a path, giving you objectives to do, giving you a lot to explore and a lot of puzzles, which are really, really well done across the entire environment, just works. For as good as 4 is, the reason why I rank it so low is just because it doesn't have that feeling of a Resident Evil, whereas Village captures that feeling. It has that exploration, it has that puzzle solving that a lot of the games on this list do not include. And for me, that's one of the key components to a Resident Evil game, is finding these items and finding these things around the environment, and then going around and kind of upgrading yourself to a certain extent, or giving yourself better weapons or whatever it is in the older games. And Village just has all that, and it has all that in spades, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Okay, so am I happy with this list? No. No, I'm not. There's some things here that don't deserve to be as high as they are. First one is this. Resident Evil 3 getting bumped down. I'm really happy with this. Really happy with this. 0 really pissed me off with its item management. And as much as I hate 4 being above it, because it would just be banter to put it lower, I can't justify it. Yeah, do you know what? I'm pretty happy with that. I'm pretty happy with that. That's it. Yeah, so that's it. That's my ranking. Now, obviously, I've got a long way to go, and there's a lot more entries to cover. So this whole list is going to be revisited at the end of the next series, which as it stands is looking like it's going to be the Resident Evil spin-offs. So what I will do when I get towards the end of those spin-offs, and Christ, I got a lot of games in there to do. When I get to the end of that, I'll then loop back and do Resident Evil 1, Director's Cut, and Resident Evil 2, original on PS1. And then I'll do a full list on every single Resident Evil game. And I don't know if this list will change from this position, but I imagine it probably will, especially getting some more distance away from Village and rerunning it through a couple more times. Who knows, it could change, but I'm pretty happy with that right now. But as I said at the start of this video, if you've been enjoying my content, then put a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel because there's going to be a lot of extra stuff coming up, especially with Resident Evil. And let me know your thoughts. Let me know your rankings underneath. There's no right or wrong here. And I welcome everybody, no matter if you think my opinions are completely trash or if you vibe with them. it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we're all fans, and it's just good to hear people's kind of rationale and to kind of bounce things off each other and kind of challenge your own thought processes. And that's what I've tried to do throughout every single one of my reviews, is going with an open mind. And it has changed a couple of my opinions on some things. But I hope you enjoyed the video regardless. I'll see you guys soon in the next couple of weeks for Resident Evil Survivor. Dear God. Take care, guys.